Welcome to our second episode of the Read and Repeat podcast. My name is Juliana, and I am here with Taylor, my twin sister, who is also my co-host. Better?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. For this episode, we are rereading. Well, we already reread a very beloved book from our childhood. One of my favorite books ever, actually, called Lily's Ghost by Laura Ruby. Which was a lot of fun. It's actually technically I think a children's novel. It's kind of classified in that genre, and it's very cute. And I had a lot of fun rereading it. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah. So if you're all not familiar with our podcast, we are rereading books that we used to read when we were younger and discussing them. And so there will be some major spoilers if you haven't read Lily's Ghost before. So just be aware of that. If you have read it, awesome. You can let us know what you think, and hopefully this inspires you to read it if you haven't. Because now
But if you haven't and you want to read it without any spoilers, it's literally like 250 pages, so just go for it. It's so short. Do it.
it's true. It's a quick read.
And then come back and listen.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll give a quick-ish synopsis of the book. So Lily is our main character. She's 13 years old. She just moved from Montclair, New Jersey to a town called Cape May, which I think is also in New Jersey.
Yes.
On the water, with her mom. So she lives with her mom, and it's just the two of them. They moved out of her mom's boyfriend's house, and now she's basically living in her uncle's old Cape mansion, because her mother's family is very rich, but she and Lily are not very rich. So that's where Lily is when we meet her. And but the whole book is about, it's not just about Lily, although it's very much about Lily. It's about Lily and her experience in this home with her mother and with the ghosts that surround her and surround all of us in this universe. So the book is interspersed. We're seeing Lily go through her ordeal, which is, a lot for a 13-year-old. She's been uprooted again for the umpteenth time. And she's trying to come to terms with her situation while she's being haunted by multiple ghosts. The ghost of her dead uncle Max, the ghost of her dead grandmother Catherine, and the ghost of a high school uh, performer who died in the 80s, who is haunting Lily because she thinks that she is her old high school nemesis, which is obviously not the case. Um, so we basically follow Lily as like she's trying to figure out what the heck is happening to her. She meets a boy in town, even though she's being homeschooled. She meets another middle schooler, and he kind of clues her into the fact that, oh, it might be ghosts because he's had some experiences himself. And so they start researching the history of the house that Lily's in and her family, and she starts to uncover these secrets about how Max died, how Catherine died, and it all culminates with a standoff between her and her mom and her friend Vaz and her uncle Wes and these two accomplices that he's got, because the whole time he's been trying to find some treasure that Max had when he was alive. And you find out that Uncle Wes is really bad and he killed Max. He set a bunch of fires when he was younger and blamed them on Max. But happy to say, Max and Catherine and the ghost Lola all have the last word. Um, so that wasn't the best. There's a lot more to it, but I was trying to be a little bit brief. We're going to get into more details now.
That
But
was actually more than I thought you were going to say, because it is kind of a mystery. So it's like, but at the same time, I mean, we're here to spoil the whole story, so it's like,
yeah,
it doesn't matter.
yeah, I already said.
But I was expecting you to
spoilers.
cut it off with like a, and
And hilarity ensues.
yeah,
No.
exactly. Hilarity does ensue, though. It is
Yeah,
pretty funny in
it's a
parts.
delightful book. Okay, so we already said like we've read this before. We read this one. I think we both read this multiple times when we were kids. The copy that we have is completely falling apart. It's like duct taped.
Yeah.
So we'll start by sharing, what we thought of it when we first read it. So I'll just briefly say, I mean, I always really enjoyed the book. I thought it was, I remember my favorite parts were the ones, basically the stories interspersed between Lily's point of view and then the ghost's point of view. I always love the parts with the ghost, and I love the parts with this ghost Lola, because she was like this. She's the one who was like the high school, um, not performer. Like, what is the word I'm looking for? The high school.
She was in like a high school production of Damn
Yeah,
Yankees in the 80s.
yeah, yeah,
And
in
then
the
she dropped
80s.
dead at a performance, or like at the stage party or something like that, whatever
Yeah,
you call it.
yeah.
She was a theater
And
kid.
that's like the last thing that she remembers, and she doesn't even remember her name, but like she remembers the scenario and that she was meant to be Lola, and she's just like crazy and a little off the wall. And I remember when I was a kid, I really loved those parts.
And as for me, I mean, I already mentioned it was one of my favorite books growing up, for sure. Read it so many times. I remember we first picked it up at actually, I think those book fairs. I mean, obviously I know you know, Taylor, but for our
Yeah,
viewers, listeners, whatever,
Scholastic book fairs.
the Scholastic book fairs, in like some, like first, second, third grade, whatever. I went to one, and I think my mom actually picked it out because parents could come and visit for the book fair, and so she picked it out for me, I'm pretty sure, and then we both read it. And as I mentioned, I mean, I love it. I loved it when I was little. I read it so many times. I think I remember very much. I don't want to say like I related to the character of Lily, because Lily has a very specific life story that's different than mine.
Yeah,
But there's just something about her as a character. I think, and it's in the way that Laura Ruby really creates all of her characters, and especially maybe on this read through, it was more apparent because of our previous read through, where we were reading a book that I just didn't feel illustrated the characters as effectively as it could have. In this one, it felt like the characters
diplomatic
were
way of putting that.
were very well drawn. Like to the point where I feel like I could draw them, because they're like characters,
Yeah,
and it just felt Lily was a very vivid main character that was easy to relate to in her specificity. And I think that just really drew me to the story.
yeah, and I think you're right. All of the characters are very vivid. Like, I can picture this so easily when I'm reading it.
Mhm.
Like, the whole story is just so well done.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know how you picture it in your head, but I had a very specific image in my head of how things like went, and how characters looked. I mean, generally I don't like see faces or details
Yeah, the faces
necessarily
are
when I'm
hard.
imagining, but
Yeah.
at the same time, like the whole gist of the scene, like it's like as soon as I started reading it, it was basically like I was seeing the same like images as I would have seen in my head when I was a kid. Like it was just
Yeah,
coming
same.
back to me.
Yeah, and even now, as like we're talking about it, like everything I'm imagining, I'm like, yeah, I can picture it very clearly, and that's the way that I pictured it when I was younger too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, great stuff when I was little. And then let's talk about our even though we already kind of got into it, but like
Yeah.
our current impressions. Go.
Oh, I mean, I definitely like it. It holds up. It totally holds up. I it's like, yeah, it's about a young. It's focused on a young character, and like, well, I guess we should mention we're 26, so I guess we're twice the age that
Yeah.
Lily is in this book. But I mean, it's so easy to get into the story. It's a great story. One of the things that I always remember was like, I love the ghost part because I love history. I love that kind of stuff. And I feel like that still gets me sucked in, like the mystery and the history that she's uncovering. And I just felt everything, basically everything felt super realistic. Like, or if not realistic, because we are talking about ghosts and like what they have the ability to do, like, and how they interplay with the like mortal world or real world. I don't know. Putting that aside, whatever you believe, like you can get into it. I actually read it through twice. I know, I think you did too, like for this, because it is a quick read, but I mean, it's good.
Yeah.
There's only one part where I felt like it took me out of it, where I was like, oh, this is a kid's book. And it was at the very end when
Let's
they
get into that. Let's talk about
yeah,
that
okay,
actually
okay,
later, because I think
okay.
that'll be a good point to bring up, because I don't think either of us are gonna have maybe the quote unquote complaints that we had with like the
Yeah.
previous book that we really are gonna get into. So that'll be something that I feel like it's good to talk about later, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, going in, same thing basically. Like, it really held up, and especially, like, I know I keep comparing it to like the book that we had previously read, but it just seems like a good example of like things that I'm looking for in a story that it delivered. Whereas maybe like
Hmm.
the book we read previously, you know, a lot of things that I'm looking for in a story weren't necessarily there, but it was also a very
Yeah.
different kind of story.
And
Um,
I'd say there's different levels of like, I'm not, the other one that we read was super, there was tons and tons of elements, and that might have added to
yeah,
some of the like,
like that. This is very much more of a it's a standalone novel. It's not setting up any
yeah,
kind of
it's
series.
very contained.
And honestly, sometimes it's just like when you get like a really good standalone novel, like there's nothing else like it. Like, I
Oh,
love a
and
good
like,
series like anyone else, but
yeah, but this is like, I mean,
it's
yeah.
a complete story. And I love you know, I said it's really in the children's genre, but one of the things I just really want to point out is like the genre, the age range a story is intended for, honestly doesn't really matter when it comes to quality of writing.
No,
Like,
definitely agree. Yeah.
this, I mean, I was reading this, I was like, this feels like someone who has a real grasp on storytelling. Like, I
Hmm.
think I actually looked it up, so it's actually I believe I believe it was Laura Ruby's first novel. I believe she's a professor. I don't know how long she, like, what other writing she did beforehand. I think this was her first published novel, though, back in like 2003 or something like that. And so, you know, I think she's a professor in like English or something like that. I looked it up a while ago because actually we started reading for this like
Hmm.
a while ago. But clearly she knows her craft, because I feel like, not, I mean, I know this, again, it's a children's novel, but like it's a good one. And
Yeah,
for a debut novel, it's like, this is really good.
it's excellent. I mean, it's so, so well done. Like,
Yeah.
I can't even stress that enough. Like, the story, like, it's contained in the sense of like, it doesn't overextend itself in any way. Like, everything is kind of like, everything is addressed, everything is detailed, everything, it seems very well thought through. And the characters are all interesting. And I mean, like I said in the beginning, like, my favorite parts were when I was a kid were the Lola parts, when she's haunting Lily. But like, that didn't mean I didn't like the rest of it. Like, everything was great, you know? I mean, we read this so many times, and I feel like you can get more out of it every time,
Yeah.
or even if not more, it always is this, like, there's never less. You know, you're never like, oh, I just read it. Like, I could reread it now,
Yeah.
probably, and after rereading it twice in the past like 3 weeks.
Exactly. It really is. It's just so good. And that's the thing, is like, it's not to say like there aren't things that someone could go in and couldn't, like, you know, critique or
Yeah,
take issue with or anything like that. But it's just that it's one of those books where rereading it, you know, you don't feel the need to do that. It's not like you go back to it and you're like, oh God, you know. It
yeah,
really just, the story just flows, where it's you know, even if there are things you want to pick apart, if you really want to go into it with that, you know, it's not necessarily the mindset that you feel like you're in throughout the read. Which, you know, there are some books where
yeah.
there are things that take you out of it. This doesn't feel like a story where
Doesn't
you
have too
have a
much.
lot of that.
Yeah. But let's get into the specifics now, because I know we've got a bunch of things that we want to talk about, and we keep talking about how
Yes.
good it is. Let's talk about what makes it so good.
So actually, one thing I want to do, I think I might want to make this a thing, but I don't know. We'll see. I don't make promises. Not that this
Okay.
would be a big promise. I kind of want to like always look at the first line of the stories that we talk about. For this one
Sure.
though, I
I've
want to
got it
look at.
up.
There are technically two first lines, because like there's one that's technically the first line, and then there's one that's
Hmm.
like I consider the true first line of the story.
To give some more context to that, it starts with a kind of description of like there's, remember how we said it interspersed like between Lily's point of view and like the ghost point of view. It kind of starts from the ghost point of view, kind of explaining the world. There's like a very short, like 2 page, maybe not even like 1 page. I'm on a Kindle, so it's 2 pages, but I think it'd probably just be 1 page in the book. Um, like just 1 page about ghosts and their existence, and then it goes into chapter one, which is like the real first. So the first, I'll do the first line of the
Of the
boo part. Yeah,
mini-sode boo.
the mini-sode. It's called boo. Um, so the first part, or the first sentence, the historic city of Cape May, a charming shore village on the tiptoe of New Jersey. Oh, it literally said it right in the beginning. I was like, where is this set? Yeah, New Jersey. Um, is famous for three things: Victorian homes frosted pink and white as the sweetest cakes, sun-washed beaches littered with, quote, diamonds, and many befuddled ghosts.
I started reading this book. I forgot about this little section in the front, and
Yeah.
I was ready for the intro. The first sentence that I will talk about in a few minutes that I never forgot. I was ready for that. So when I saw this, I was like, oh wait, what? And then I remembered, and I was like, oh okay. I will say, like, part of me wants to be like, unnecessary, get rid of it. We just want the other first line to be the first line of the book. But overall, like, it doesn't take away from the story at all. And it does set up the the setting, which is very important. I think Cape May
is very important.
Is very important to the story. And as far as that goes, I mean, I don't think it's a bad line at all. It sets up the Victorian homes, which is important to this. The Sunwatch. I even like with the sunwashed beaches littered with diamonds, quote unquote. I'm assuming that's alluding to like some certain quality of like the sand or like the stones that you find on the beach or whatever. But that even like sets up for me almost like the idea of like a treasure hunt kind of thing.
Yeah.
That doesn't even become like a big part of the story until like later on. Like it's littered throughout like hints that there might be something to do with the treasure, but it's not like the characters are going on a treasure hunt throughout the story, but like it's like almost foreshadowing in a way, like indirectly. So I like that.
There's another great example of foreshadowing a little bit later on that I want to or cool like Easter egg foreshadow that I want to bring up. But yeah, I think this is good at setting the stage.
Yeah.
Like I get why you like the real first line as a start, but like I like this because then it's also like at the end you're like, if you don't, I mean, the book is called Lily's Ghost, so you might imagine that there's ghosts involved, but like you're like, oh, like historic Cape May, cool ghosts, like, oh yeah, okay, like, and then the author gets into like a little bit about ghosts and like getting you prepped for that.
Yeah, and I like many befuddled ghosts, and like, yeah, like all these ghost characters are pretty befuddled. We'll learn, and and then she sets up the whole like kind of like rules of the trade for like how ghosts function in this book universe, which is important. So it's good. It's nice, and we'll talk more about like we always say this, like we'll talk more about. But like I don't want to talk about everything up front, but it's just there's so many things. But with these little interlude chapters that we get that are subsequently mostly from ghost perspectives, some of them are actually from living characters, like one or two. But those do also provide us with a nice we'll talk about Lily, and I love her perspective for the story. I think she's great, but it is nice. I personally love a book where you have multiple perspectives. From a world building sense.
Yeah, exactly. And you can also take a break too, like, and kind of get into a different like mindset and come back to a different, I think it especially, not that this one is too like heavy in any way, but I'd say it especially helps in books where like, there's a like, some difficult stuff going on, and then you can like jump to different characters' perspectives.
Yeah, exactly. It just makes everything feel so much more, the world feels
more
three-dimensional.
Yeah.
And especially, I think that it's partially like having it in third person perspective and partially having it like from multiple different perspectives too. I mean, third person, depending on how close or distant you are, again, like that can still be limiting in some way. But yeah, and I love the way this book does it, because, you still have your main central character, but then you have these little vignettes of like just random other ones that are pretty quirky. And like they don't always feel like, oh, every single detail of this is so important to the story that like if it wasn't here I couldn't understand it. Some of it's just there to like lend to a character and just make something fun. Okay.
You want to read the first line of chapter 1?
Just after 6 p.m, with the January sky glowering through the windows, Lily decided to throw Uncle Max in the closet. Just like, it's just great because you get this very specific picture of like this winter evening, exactly what time of day it is. And even though, okay, so it says just after 6 p.m, this January sky glowering through the windows. To me, that makes me imagine like a very intense kind of sunset. Like the sun is like really just about to like disappear. Realistically, we live on the East Coast. I feel like the sun would already be gone in January. Then again, January is later on, so like maybe it's starting to come back a little bit. I don't know. I just feel like winter is just a haze of like 5 p.m. sunsets until like all of a sudden one day it's like 7 and the sun is still out, or maybe things have changed in the past like
20 years.
I don't know. but still, regardless, like I have that very vivid image in my mind. I know what she means. And Lily decided to throw Uncle Max in the closet. It's like, what does that mean? how do you throw your uncle in the closet and like what's
Yeah.
going on there? And of course, you know, we find out it's actually a very hideous painting that was on the wall of their new temporary home, which belonged to Lily's mother's uncle. And Lily, being very unhappy to have been uprooted from her life in Montclair, is just like not having it. She's just like, I don't want to look at this ugly painting on this wall of this house I don't want to be in.
Yeah. Is an artist. She lets Lily like do whatever she wants, kinda. She pays some more attention, it seems, at times to her boyfriends than Lily, but that also could be Lily's perspective. And she's just kind of like crazy and out there, and Lily's the exact opposite.
Yeah. And actually,
yeah.
there are two quotes I have highlighted
Yeah.
that illustrate this, which is, it's really basically like both of their introductions, like on the first like few pages. So this is right after Lily's mom, like she just got back from getting some groceries and she realized she forgot coffee, and
She forgot milk for the
she
coffee.
forgot milk for the coffee. Yes, sorry.
That's the one place where Lily's mom is like a traditional, or like one of the places where she is a traditional, like stereotypical adult. She's not in so many ways, but she was like, oh, have to go back for the milk because I need it for my coffee.
Yeah. And so she said, so she's basically saying like, I gotta go get it. I won't bother taking off my coat. You wouldn't believe how cold it is out there. And then we get Lily's kind of perspective on her mother. Lily scowled at her mother's orange cape, the loud patchwork skirt peeking out from beneath it. It's January, Mom. It's supposed to be cold, isn't it? I just didn't think it would be this cold. You never think it will be this cold, Lily said, or this bad, or this hard, or this long. What are you talking about? Never mind. So that, first of all, I mean, it helps establish Lily's mom's character, but also establishes their relationship as just like flighty mother who is maybe a bit more out there than is comfortable for Lily, who, as we were gathering from this, is someone who has been moved around a lot, who kind of is at the mercy of her mother's whims, more or less, and is not taking kindly to it, especially on this January evening, where she is far away from her microscope, which she talks about. She had a microscope in Montclair that her mother's previous boyfriend had given her, and now she's separated from it. Yeah, so I feel like this really establishes like her mom, like she's wearing out like wild clothing, and Lily is just like not. She's just like basically like
duh, Mom, like you're an adult. You, again, like just another example of how you are not acting like an adult. You don't even understand the weather in January. Like,
yeah, exactly. And you know, and then we have like a Lily kind of almost like her assessment of herself too, not too many pages later, like I think maybe on the next page. We have like more of a description of Lily that I feel like really works here. I mean, everything I think that Lily does and says works to characterize herself and the other characters from her perspective, but this passage really, I always remember this one too, actually, when I think of this book. Lily inspected the split ends of her long cinnamon stick hair. She was used to being as tall as her mother, as tall as an adult. She was 13, but sometimes Lily felt like an adult, the way she imagined an adult would feel. Tired, disappointed. So
you're like, damn, this girl is 13.
She is 13 and she is tired and disappointed. She has that. I mean, I say this in not in the sense that I think this is how adulthood should be, or that it's the attitude that I think that we should take. But as far as like the stereotypical like attitude that we expect of adults, like she has it down. Really, I think one of the nicest things about this novel is actually seeing Lily grow as a character and how she changes from like this through the end. It's just a very, very smooth kind of character journey that we have. That doesn't feel like gradual. It sacrifices her character at all for who she is.
No, and like she still is herself, but she's just open to more by the end of the book. Like she has her pragmatic side for sure. That's still definitely intact, but she's just open to other things, and like not just ghosts as she is by the end, but like she's also open to friendships that she doesn't have when she gets here, and she's open to, you know, meeting new people and doing new things that she wouldn't have done. So it's just a like growth addition to her character, but she's still definitely like
exactly like she's a character who you could tell she's been through a lot. She's they'd moved around, as we learn like later. Like every time her mom gets a new boyfriend, they have to move. They move around. They've lived in several states. She doesn't really get to stay with people and make friends and keep them.
Yeah.
She's the kind of person, like character, who seems to like exist in this bitterness of that, but also keep herself distant because of that. Someone who's like clearly unsatisfied with her situation, but also unwilling to take steps to make it better because she doesn't expect that it'll be able to stay better, basically. And then we get this one more quote at the end of the first chapter too that really illustrates kind of where she's at. Is the last line, which is, but when the phone rang, Lily pounced on it, realizing after she gulped her eager hellos that no one was there. Prickly. She's been established as a very prickly character, but then she also jumps on like the phone in the strange house. It's not her house, that she just moved to. Like she jumps on that phone. Like I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Personally, if I were in her position.
When the phone rings and like I'm somewhere by myself for the first time, I'm like, nope.
Yeah, but she's like, you know, ready to talk to someone. So like it's clear that like though she makes herself, and we see this later when she meets other characters, she just makes herself like just not very approachable. But she really, really wants to talk to someone. She wants to make connections. She's very lonely. She just does such a great job. This is what they mean by like show don't tell. Where there are places where like the narrative just outright tells you things. Like Laura Ruby just straight up told us that Lily sees herself as like an adult, you know, like she could have left that to be illustrated in the narrative, but it's something that's also important to Lily as a character, that she pictures herself that way in terms of like her attitude. But then there's also like the moments where she doesn't have to say that Lily is lonely. It's illustrated, you know, just through her actions, and you can guess that through her attitude and through her unwillingness to make friends when her mother suggests that she goes to school and she doesn't want to go to school because she doesn't want to meet new people and have to move again. It's just so good. That's what they mean by show don't tell. Because I think sometimes people don't know what that means. Because I don't think I did when I was younger and I was growing up and I wanted to like write, and I was like, show don't tell, okay, but like what does that mean? Like you kind of get it after you know, when you get older and you start really, if you're interested in writing at all, take a few writing courses and they make it clear. then you'll never like read a book the same again. You'll just be, every time you read a book and you're like, wow, they could have illustrated this character motivation, honestly the thing I see most often in books, I think, where I note it, is like where a character motivation or like something about the character will be illustrated so well by like an action or something that the character said or whatever, but then it will also be stated like several times. Like,
I mean,
and I'm like, you didn't have to say any of that. You did the job. You overdid the job now. You don't have to say it, you know?
I think there's some more leeway in books because things are written down and they're longer, like to say things, than like movies, for example, where it's like if they just say stuff, it kind of is super, super jarring sometimes because it's like, oh, okay, like I'm now you're just telling me what's going on and I'm watching you tell me what's going on, as opposed to like you're reading a book and there's a way more like ability to describe. But at that same token is like you have more ability to describe things, so you don't necessarily need to say everything.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the thing. Is like if you're doing a good job of showing already, it can get a little frustrating when there's like an overabundance of telling in addition to it, you know? I mean, you can't show everything. Sometimes you just got to say something and move on. But but anyway, what do I know about
now we're on a tangent that doesn't actually directly have to do with Lily's ghosts. So I think we got to talk about the ghosts.
Yeah, because really the next chapter is Lemonade, which is the first ghost chapter.
So it constantly alternates. So like we've got chapter 1, we've got Boo, which is the introduction to the ghosts, then chapter 1, then Lemonade, which is an introduction to specific ghosts. And actually specifically this couple who died in a car crash, but they like I forget how long ago, like 20
I think it was ago, like in the 1970s. 30?
In the 1970s, so this was 2003, so like 30 years ago, let's say, at the time that this was written. And they're basically reliving their plans for the day that they got in the car crash, which was going to the beach. And they don't really they know something's off, you know, they're having a conversation about like, you know, is the concession stand open? You know, where's the lemonade? Where's the car? They can't quite recall, but they're still stuck in their pattern of this last day, and they're continuously sitting on the beach and having this conversation, like basically throughout the whole book until the end. And so they're one example of the types of ghosts in the book. They're an example of the ghosts that they don't know that they are dead, essentially. And so they're just living life, or they're going through their afterlife as
They're
if they
living
are
death.
just living life. Yeah.
They're kind of funny. They're clearly, and a lot of these ghosts too. And I think it's interesting. I mean, some of the characters are a bit come off of as a bit of caricatures too, just in terms of, I think that's kind of the story that we're telling, where only a few of the characters are really fully fleshed out because there's not a lot of space. It's a short book. But some of the ghosts are more caricatures in a way that feels like it's very much built into their ghosthood. In the sense that, like, it feels like almost like most of these ghosts here, especially if they're ones who really don't know that they're dead or don't remember like their full like past, like their life. We do see a distinction between them and like Max, for example, who seems like a very, very cognizant ghost. And again with Lola too, who's kind of a different example of like almost like the inverse of this couple in the way that she exhibits her ghosthood. And it's just, yeah, so they're funny. They're funny. They're very much like a stuck in the past, literally, couple. And you see them, you witness them. The way that time works is pretty funny, because with them, like, again, like they're living like they're experiencing the same day, but like we'll encounter their perspective at a few different points in the novel, and then every single one of those points we know time has passed, but they do not. To them, it's the same day. So time is really tricky when you're reading their passages and you're trying to figure out like when they are. You only really know if like they interact directly or indirectly with other characters that you're aware of who are existing in time, like Lily. At certain points, she'll be on the beach and they'll, you know, reference a girl with red hair. They see other ghosts around them. They can see other ghosts around them, but they don't know they're ghosts either. So they're just like, oh, why is this like 1800s like pirate captain standing on the beach? Like, why is he dressed like that?
And what a weird bathing suit that girl is wearing, and that girl died in 1909. So, yeah. It's
really cool, like what their chapters do kind of with like time and space.
Yeah. And I mean they're all stuck in time. Like you said, Lola's like kind of the inverse. I mean, I think she's also super stuck, but she's just aware that she's dead. But we already mentioned it, I think, but like she forgets her name, she forgets what her mother looks like, and all she remembers is that she was supposed to play Lola in Damn Yankees, but it got stolen from her by this other girl, Steffi. But in death, she calls herself Lola because it was the role that she was born to play. She's hyper fixated on that role, and she also forgets her name. So she just calls herself Lola, and like it's her mission in the afterlife. Again, she knows she's dead. It's her mission in the afterlife to wreak havoc on Steffi and get payback for Steffi being the one to actually play Lola in Damn Yankees. But she can't even remember who Steffi is, what she looks like. I am not even certain that Lola was from Cape May to begin with.
Like, yeah, we don't even know. And we don't even know, like, we don't even know, honestly, what Steffi actually looked like either, because we find out gradually as we go that her victims have all been, like, people of different ages, different hair colors. Yeah, everything. Like,
Lola's got no idea.
She has no idea what Steffi actually looks like, but she'll just see someone one day and she'll be like, oh my God, that's her, and then she'll be off. So it's funny because she's aware, and she judges at a certain point that the older couple for not being aware that they're dead. But she's aware that she's dead, but she has no clue, like, what basically she's just this, like, vengeful spirit. And funny too. She's really funny.
I do enjoy her parts. So she mistakes Lily for Steffi.
Yeah, and that's how she gets tied
tangled
into
up. Yeah,
this whole thing. So she's just kind of around, and it's funny because we'll have these interactions with the ghosts, and then we'll have chapters where, you know, like, or usually it's kind of vice versa, where like we'll have chapters where something happens, and then we'll have a chapter with the ghosts, and we'll see how, like, we might learn how a certain interaction happened, because we know at a certain point that Max is also haunting Lily, but we don't really get any chapters. We don't get any chapters with him. We get one chapter with Catherine later on. And the way that we learn more about Max is actually through a dream that Lily has, we'll talk about later. We know that Max is there, though, because we kind of learn, like, oh, he died in the house. Oh, he's probably, yeah, he's one of the people haunting her. But there's all these antics going on. We know that Lola is also participating in, where she directly impacts Lily. So it's kind of like, this weird thing happens. Wait, was it Max or Lola? We find out in most cases it was Lola, but sometimes it was Max. So playing the game of, like, figuring out who did what, I mean, it's pretty obvious at a certain point, because Lola's the one who's, like, pulling the pranks, and Max is really trying to lead Lily to certain conclusions, so you can kind of figure it out. But, like, on Lily's part, though, it's really cool how it kind of ends up being like like, this ghost is haunting me. Why do they keep doing, like, this weird stuff? Like, why is this ghost, like, she doesn't know it's more than one.
Yeah, why she thinks it's her Uncle Max's ghost when she finds out that he died. And she's like, why did he fill my shoes with jam? Why did he dye my hair pink? What does it mean? And that's Lola. Lola's the one who did it, and Lola's got no reason to be haunting Lily other than she thinks that she's Steffi. Like,
yeah.
It's just happenstance that Lily's being haunted by multiple ghosts.
It's just so fun. I love I love how, like, the two, I mean, there's not really two sides of the story, because, like I said, like, it's all from these different ghost perspectives, and one from a psychic's perspective too. And not all these stories come together. Like, these characters don't all learn the truths of the situations that are going on with each other. Right. But it just feels like it's parallel situations happening at the same time, and sometimes they impact each other, and it just makes the world feel bigger. It's nice. I like it.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about those ghosts that we already talked about? Because I feel like those are the ones that really get the most characterization, and, like, if we want to get into Max and Catherine, I feel like we could do that later.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fine to. I think we said enough about them for now. They'll come up again, but where do you want to go if you don't want to go to Max and Catherine?
Let's talk a little bit more about some of the hauntings and how it's introduced in Lily's perspective. So basically, while they're in Cape May, Lily has requested to her mother that she finish out this school year that they're in the midst of homeschooling. She doesn't know where they're going to end up moving to, so she doesn't want to make any friends. She doesn't want to go to school, whatever. So Lily's mom was able to get a job via her uncle Wes, who owns the house, at one of the local shops in Cape May. That's not open yet, but she's going to be an assistant manager, so she's got to go in and get things ready for the opening season. So that's what she's doing. So most days she'll go there for at least half the day, and Lily will be left to her own devices in this Victorian home, where obviously spooky things are about to start happening. So, so I love these beginning chapters because it is, like, it's a little spooky, but
it is. It's so spooky. Like, I'm trying to find the part. I just think it's so basically, like, Lily is like one of the first days that she's home alone in this house. Like, she's got her school books, and she's, like, she's doing laundry and blah blah blah. And there's this doll that it was her mother's mother's doll. It's a Cupid doll. I don't know.
I've looked them up. They are pretty, like, creepy looking.
Yeah, I can imagine it based on the description, but, like, her mother insists on, like, bring it with her because her mother's mother died, and so Arden, who's Lily's mother, that's her name, Arden. So let's just call her Arden. Arden doesn't want to get rid of the doll, right? And she's like, it's just a doll, and Lily's always thought it was creepy, and so, like, Lily's in the basement doing laundry, and the doll is sitting on a chair down there, and it keeps moving, like, changing position. Like, it's sitting in the chair, but, like, its head turns to face her, and then its arms go up or go down, and it's creepy. Like, I read this again. I read this how many times, and I was reading it again, and I was like, yeah, this is creepy. Like, I'm creeped out, and I just thought that was so well done that a book could make me feel creeped out. That I read a million times, and also, like, I knew that it was fine.
Like, yeah, because like, later on you find out, like, Lola is the one moving the doll around, and when it's Lola, it's like, okay, but
it's like, yeah, it's Lola.
But from Lily's perspective, like, it's really creepy, especially because Lily, it takes the opportunity to further establish her as a very practical, very, like, no nonsense person who doesn't fancy herself someone who could be spooked easily because she doesn't, you know, believe in all of that. Like it's just kind of implied. And we get this fantastic bit where before, like when she's waiting for the laundry to be done and she's just kind of hanging out there and she noticed the doll, but she's not really looking at it. You know, she's reading some magazines and like she's reading about like the Titanic and the guy who found, you know, the who went down there, basically filmed the shipwreck and saw the shoes that were down there. Really cool, like specific details and things about like how they found shoes of the passengers down there that were preserved and whatnot, and how he wouldn't like disturb them because he thought it was more important to leave it as like a monument to the people than to like basically dig them up and like sell them for money, like, you know, they would be worth a lot of money. And then we get this line that says, at this, Lily snorted. She thought plenty of science, but how many millions of dollars had it cost to fund the scientific expedition to find the Titanic? If there wasn't any money, there wasn't much science. It's her attitude of like practicality, like we got to have money to have science, like sentimentality and all that, like who cares. And it's, again, this is really in contrast to her mother's like very, we get more scenes about this later on where, you know, it's really like her mother trying to really put more emphasis on love and art and things that are just less tangible and really engage with that.
Kind of anti-money
in
a way, because her family really had money.
Yeah, and you know, she's comes from money and she sees how it basically didn't really make her family happy, and so she's trying to find something, you know, deeper than that. And Lily, you know, swings to the other end of the spectrum because she's sick of, you know, having to bounce from place to place and not, you know, have enough money to eat good food and these kinds of things, and you know, basically live comfortably, which is also understandable. It's really kind of two sides of a coin where you can understand both perspectives, and it's well illustrated in how these characters have kind of come to their separate conclusions about life. I think Catherine is the one who actually might be the one playing with the doll. Max might have
That's
too.
what I'm not sure. It might have been Max, but I'm not sure, like,
because Catherine does take the doll later on in the story.
Yeah,
this could be Max. This could be because the Cupid doll we learn later is important to the mystery, but actually I don't think so Lily ever finds out.
Right. We're not certain if it's Max or Catherine specifically.
Yeah, you know, I never really, I just assumed, oh yeah, probably Lola. She's, you know, freak her out. No, that makes so much sense. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, because she's freaked out. I think it is Max because, like, Catherine's the one who moved her books, but Max is the one who's breathing afterwards, and that's what causes her to go outside.
Yeah.
So, like, this whole day where, like, she's doing the laundry, and then she, like, sees the doll moving, and then she goes upstairs to get her books, but her books are gone. Oh, and then the phone rings. She doesn't hear any breathing. The phone rings, and a voice on the other end says, "Hello, Lily." And that was, like, the last straw for her. She, like, went outside the house and started running around, and she ran smack into her future BFF/boyfriend, Vaz.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about Vaz.
Yeah, let's talk about Vaz.
Love Vaz. I remember when I was little, I, like, had such a crush on him. Thought he was so cute. Yeah. He is
more open-minded.
Yeah, open-minded in terms of like, oh, like ghosts and shit. Yeah, that's a thing. Friendly in the sense that like Lily, you know, she's very prickly meeting him, and even the first couple times that they interact after the fact. But he's the one who, like, you know, he comes back to her house too. So basically how they meet is she runs around her house in terror, the outside of her house, and she runs out to the sidewalk and bangs into him basically after all this haunting stuff happens. And he has been walking down the street with holding a paper towel to his nose because he got beat up. So he's got a broken nose, and she bangs into him, probably makes it a lot worse. And they have, you know, a kind of frustrated exchange where she ultimately ends up giving him her sweatshirt to hold on to his nose, not necessarily because she feels bad about having banged into him or the fact that he's bleeding, but because she was afraid like he would come back and like ask her to pay for like the cleaning on his like jacket. Like she knocked him over into the grass,
and she's very conscious that like her mother doesn't have the money for that, and she's like,
so she's like, all right, I'll give him my sweatshirt as like penance basically for that. Hopefully that resolves things, whatever. And you know, part of her, I think there is this inclination that she you know, he's a cute boy even with the broken nose. She does want to make friends. She's not you know, but she doesn't know how. She doesn't want to be open and friendly because she just doesn't want to open
She's
herself up
afraid
to get
to.
hurt.
Yeah,
When,
she's been hurt too many times.
yeah, and in the sense where she's had to leave people, not that necessarily she's like been hurt romantically or anything like that. It's really does start out off as like very much a friendship, but yeah, so she's very prickly in this first meeting, and he's just kind of like, I mean, he's not like happy because he has a broken nose, but he's also just like much friendlier.
Yeah.
And then from there,
But
like,
he's still like, oh, new person.
Yeah. And he's the one who really initiates their friendship. Like, he comes back with the sweatshirt. He shows up at her house. This is a time before cell phones were really a big thing, especially for 13-year-olds. So,
yeah,
you know, he just has to come back to her house to like talk to her. It's just so funny because she's like the opposite. She's like basically doing everything she can to not really be involved with anyone. And yeah, he's great. He's a lot of fun, but he's also like very much a character. Like, it's not just that you feel like, oh, he's, of course he's just like the perfect like love interest character. No, he feels like, you know, a 13-year-old boy. 13, 14, whatever.
Yeah, and they don't start off with that either. It's not obvious from the beginning.
No, yeah, it's very organic in that. Like,
he becomes the one person that she can talk to about the stuff that's going on.
Exactly.
And he actually helps her figure it out. Yeah. He's the one who like clues her in to the ghost thing, and she is like, "What? You are crazy." But obviously, eventually, she gets on board.
Yeah.
I mean, not obviously, but she does eventually get on board with that.
Yeah, and it was, yeah, I love that because it really is like, Lily is such a heavy, like, not heavy in the sense that, like, you know, this isn't really a heavy book, but it does kind of, I mean, it gets into like life and death and things like that. It really does, you know, those kinds of topics, with just the fact that it's a children's novel. But Lily is kind of like a very cynical perspective to really start with, and so it's just nice to have a character who can counterbalances that in a way that's not like, it's not the same as with her mother, because her mother, it's like a much more charged relationship in the sense that, like, that's, you know, there's a, like, when there's baggage between like a mother-daughter relationship, that's a lot, and especially in this case with her mom, you know, she and her mom being in such a precarious situation of having to rely on this family, clearly has some baggage with and things like that. It's not like, even though her mother is flighty and lighthearted in a sense, there is a lot of heaviness around that relationship. So, because there's a lot of conflict between them, like, that's kind of going to the surface. Whereas with Vaz, you know, they don't really have any conflict. So he can be a kind of more lighthearted character and actually balance her out. And it works.
Yeah, and kind of help her understand her mother a little bit more, maybe. And that is how Lola sees Lily, because Lola happened to just be also hanging out outside. She stood in Vaz's way as he was walking, so he would walk through her. And then she sees Lily running around and bang into Vaz, and she's like, "Oh my God, it's Steffi!" Obviously not Steffi, but that is how Lola comes to take up residence along with Max and Catherine and Lily and Arden in the house.
Yeah, so that's where we're getting most of our cast together for the first time, basically. And then actually the next chapter is when we get Madame Durrican for the first time.
Yeah, okay, so let's chat about her.
Yeah, so I think there's only like 2 or 3 chapters with her. I always thought of her as a bigger part of the story, only because she just felt like it. But she actually like leaves the story sooner than I remembered. But she's fun. So she's like a town psychic, basically. She runs the Good Fortunes shop with 2 P's and an E.
And an E.
And you know, she does the whole shebang: the tarot cards, the candles, the astrology, the incense, all that. And
is a medium.
Yeah. And so she basically sells herself as someone who talks to spirits and the dead. And so what's really funny about this is that she's like very simultaneously very full of herself and very like, oh, you know, I'm great and I do, like, you know, I'm fantastic and everyone loves me, but also I'm a total fraud and I know it. It's made pretty clear that, like, she's a psychic who doesn't actually believe in what she does.
And yet, like, she can, at least on some level, do what she says.
Right.
What she claims.
It's so interesting. Yeah, it's so interesting. it's like she doesn't believe what she does. She thinks her clients are stupid, but she also feels like she does good work with them. And then also when she actually does see a spirit, because what happens is this shop is actually right across from where Lily's mom works. And so she sees this lady one day in this orange cloak walk by with this ghost boy following her, and this ghost boy has like fire on his hands, like his, you know, whatever, and he's dancing. She describes
She
it
can
as,
see through him.
yeah, and she can see through him, and she's like,
But
okay.
she's like immediately like, this guy's a ghost, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah. And so it's really funny because then she just like accepts that, but she's also just like really freaked out.
Yeah, but like, yeah, so simultaneously it's just like, yeah, okay, ghost. Oh my God, ghost haunting this woman. But also, oh my God, ghost. Like, ah.
Yeah. And it's just it's really fun. And you know, we get this first chapter, this introduction to her, where she's, you know, she's in her element. She's reading for this client that she's
A repeat client.
yeah, she's had before, and she's, you know, basically making it uh a whole production, you know, and talking about how she kind of like how she reads for like tourists when they come in, and how she gets a lot of like young women looking for love readings and things like that, and basically enjoying the power that she kind of has over these clients, and just like being very, you know, like the classic like fraud psychic character. And then all of a sudden she sees like across the street this actual ghost, and she's like, oh no. um but yeah, I mean, I find this character really interesting. I like, because later on we get her like actually like trying to do her job for reals, because she's like, oh shit, like there's something actually happening here, and she's trying to read the tarot cards. And as she's doing this, and so I actually, fun fact, I do kind of read tarot cards. Like I do it for myself. I'm not like out here like Madame Durkin, but you know, and I know like in real life, like people mileage may vary with how they treat things like that, and like the occult and psychics and all that. I would say I have personal life experience that allows me to have a pretty flexible perspective on what I think is possible in the world, and how things like that work. But yeah, so I read tarot cards. It's fun. It's a good time. I know how it works. So it's just really funny to me in a later chapter where she's trying to actually read the cards, and she talks about how, oh, all these like quacks and like frauds at the psychic convention she's been to, like if they can read these cards as easily as like, you know, reading a book, then I can certainly do it. But it's just really funny that she says it like, oh, all these other people are frauds, but not me. But also they know
But
how to
like
read the
also,
cards,
but
and
also
I can't.
me, you know, like she's also,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And so we have her like, you know, she's doing a
The
very
world of
typical like
contradiction.
beginner tarot thing of like, you've got the cards and you've got your book, and you pull a card and then you read the description of like what the card means according to the book that you've got. And based on like, and basically what she's doing through this, and it's not the chapter that we were just talking about, because it's like her second or third chapter that we see her in later on in the book, but she's basically still trying to figure out like what this ghost wants, because it just bothers her so much that she keeps seeing
That
him.
she saw him, yeah, that she's
Yeah.
able to see him. And she
And
wants to make sure that he's not there for her.
yeah, and so we have her reading these cards, and like it's funny because like the meanings, I don't know like what if Laura Ruby used the meanings like based on a specific tarot book that she was looking at, because if you do get into it, you notice that if you like, you can get any kind of deck you want, and you can get a book that's associated with that deck, and it'll maybe give you slightly different meanings for each card than if you get like a different deck. Like there are traditional meanings for each card, but they vary, and like a lot of people will read intuitively, so that they won't even necessarily go by a book, but they'll flip a card and see what like impressions they get, like what thoughts come into their head based on that card in that certain situation, or they'll like or they'll have their own meanings that they came to associate with a card because of their own readings that they've done themselves, that maybe don't even always have to do with the original meanings. Like people do it all different kinds of ways. Like the way she's doing it is very, very basic beginner tarot kind of thing, but it's comes out in very like clear messages for her.
Well, are you talking about when she's reading for Max, or the other time that she's doing it? The first time that she's doing it, I guess.
When she's reading for Max when she's doing it herself by herself. Not when she's reading for Lily, because there's a time when Lily comes into the shop.
Right. That's what I'm talking about. When Max is there, because I was gonna say then she's trying to. Okay, so there's two different parts where she's reading cards, and like one is what Juliana just described, where she's doing it like for herself on her own, and then there's another one where Lily actually goes into the shop because she knows that she's being haunted. She knows that she's being haunted by Max. She doesn't know about Lola. So she basically like is like, oh, let me go see this psychic medium to tell me what the heck is going on. And so like Max is there as well, and he wants Madame Durrican to read the cards. And so she starts reading them in that same way, but it's wrong because Max is like, no, I want the literal interpretation of the picture on these cards. So then even then, like, she finally has it down kind of in the beginner sense, but she's wrong anyway.
Yeah.
Is interesting.
And so like yeah, there's like a card, one of the cards has like a boat on it, and he wants it read as like a boat, not like, I forget what actual card, I think it's the Six of Swords, probably the Six of Swords, because like in the traditional tarot that one has a boat on it.
Like, I don't think they say.
But whatever card it was, I mean, it could have been any of like the water, like the cups, like suits could have had a boat on it, King of Cups, whatever, but he wants it read as like, this is a boat. It's a boat. Like, yeah. And it's cool because it kind of shows like the differences in like reading styles. But anyway, like, I don't want to like get all into that, but it was just interesting how like the author incorporated this character who like simultaneously has so many contradictions in her psyche, but feels like an actual person. Like, you feel like you've met this person who like doesn't believe in what they do, but does believe, like, I'm not talking
but
about
also thinks that they're the best at it.
Yeah, I'm not talking about like you've met a psychic like this. I'm saying like a person who has like contradictory perspectives and holds both of those in themselves and like about themselves and about other things, like, and it's just so fun like how she did this character.
And you're right, she is only in it for like 3 or 4 sections, but it does feel like she's in more. It might only be 3.
She's very vivid, and then like literally at a certain point she just up and like moves. She's like, bye.
She's like so freaked out by her experience with Max when she's trying to read for Lily, and so she's like I'm out, goodbye, and then she's gone from the story.
And that's it. She moves. She goes to Philadelphia
South Carolina,
or something.
I think.
Oh yeah, so she's a really interesting character, and just like, I don't know, she's fun.
She's interesting. It rounds out the whole experience of ghosts, because if you have ghosts, you gotta have someone who can talk to them. And she can. She just in some way, shape, or form
doesn't
talk to
realize
them
and doesn't want to.
Even though it's her job.
So she's fun. All right, basically as the book progresses, we have more chapters with Lily where she and Vaz get to know each other. Vaz shows up at her house. She gets some more like haunting things happening to her. Some of it's Lola being, messing with her, and some of it's Max. And we get some scenes of her like being lonely and sitting on the beach by herself. And
the ghost couple that we mentioned at the beginning, like the husband accidentally knocks over her sandcastle that she's making, and
and it sounds like it was a pretty good sandcastle too.
It does. It's a house.
But then Vaz comes back. He brings back her sweatshirt, which he had dry cleaned to get the blood out. They end up talking about ghosts. Vaz tells her about his own experience, so it turns out that Vaz's dad died when he was about 6, I think it was in the book. He was a fisherman who, whose boat basically like got shipwrecked in a storm, or he just never came back after a storm or whatever. And but he, Vaz says that his dad talks to him sometimes at night, like he'll just like talk about fishing or talk about his mom and things like that. So he, he basically describes it as kind of like an imprint of his dad, like all the things that he
made
loved.
His dad, like the
life
main things.
It's kind of the essence of him. It visits him sometimes and just like talks, like, and they don't have a conversation, but like, he can hear him, and so he believes in ghosts. And so Lily at first is like, that's crazy, but then it's like, okay, maybe you're right, because the weird stuff is happening to her. So then they get closer, and then Vaz is like, I want to help you, like, learn more about this. And so basically it's his idea to look into the history of the house and find out who is haunting them.
And that's how they find out that Max died in the house.
Yes. So there's this whole cool like middle section where they're doing this research. They go to the library first and look at microfiche, which is like
Yeah.
was my first encounter with the concept. Which is like apparently how
My
sometimes
only
they kept
encounter
like
with the concept.
old newspapers,
Yeah.
and it's like almost like a little like mini projector kind of thing, and you like flip through these slides. And so they were looking on there, and they spoke to the librarian who Vaz was friendly with, who set them up with it. And she's interesting. You can tell immediately she's kind of going to be an important side character because of just like how much she's described as a person. I forgot why do I forget her name though? Aurelia, yeah, Miss Reedy. And so she sets them up with the microfilm, and so they look through it, but then they don't really find anything, but they notice that someone's burned into one of the slides getting warmer, and they're like, that's weird. And we know, like, since we kind of we know that Max is associated with fire, we know that must be him who did that. But they don't have the dates that they need to really look up, because what they're looking up basically is like wedding announcements, birth announcements, death announcements related to Lily's family, because it's like they were a local family, they were a wealthy family, and she doesn't know much about them because her mother didn't tell her much about them because she doesn't like them really. But that's basically what they're looking into, and they just don't have the right dates there. So they look that there's like a historical society branch.
Well, Mrs. Reedy the librarian directs them to the historical society. And we find out later that the guy who runs it is her brother. But the historical society is run out of this guy's house, and he's Lily's neighbor. What does she call him? Angry baby man?
Yeah, and then at a certain point she changes it to Angry Larva Man because of how
Angry Larva Man.
his house is just he has like food all over. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. So they end up going to try to go to the historical society, which is actually just run from his house that's literally next door to hers. And she's like, she remembers like picked up the keys from him. He wasn't very friendly, but she's like, all right, well, we'll just knock on the door and be like, hey, can we see the newspapers that you have on file here? And so like they go to meet him. He's really they knock on his door. He's really rude. He is kind of racist to Vaz.
Yeah, because Vaz is Greek and
like darker skinned. And so he makes a comment about it. So he says like, you're awfully dark, what are you? Which is kind of like out of the blue, and like kind of in a way that like feels realistic to how someone who would actually say that would just
act.
He's just like so rude, and like I think he almost even kind of says that as like a way to like just get them to like leave, because he interrupts them like begging him to like let them into the historical society, and he's like, no, like, it's moving, you can't come in and see it, no, like go away. Basically he's like rude about their language, and then he's rude about Vaz, and so they're just like, fuck this guy, and they leave. And then they decide to break in, so we get a little like fun breaking and entering scene,
which is like maybe one of the more unrealistic parts of it, because I'm like, can two 13-year-olds really have pulled that off? I mean, maybe they did.
Maybe in 2003.
Yeah, maybe in 2003.
Where like there's not people walking around with iPhones all the time and
right. Yeah. I mean, they pull it off, but he also like knows it's them because they overstayed their welcome. But they found what they were looking for in terms of like, that's how they found out that like they found out about these mysterious fires that were being set around the town, and there was an arsonist on the loose. And then they found out that Max had set a fire in the attic, or so it was
of Lily's new house, of the
house that Lily's now living in, and he died in the attic.
Yeah.
So then they escape. This guy, Bailey Burton, they escape his house barely. He knows it's them, but like he doesn't see them, but he knows. And they go up to the attic basically, and it's funny because like they get in there and the door is like wildly swinging open, shut, open, shut, open, shut, and then you find out that it's like Lola and Max like fighting over control of the door, trying to, like Lola wants to punch him, and Max is like trying to stop her, and it's a whole thing. They end up getting locked in there, and then that's where they kiss for the first time.
Yeah, and
And
it's
only in
really
pen, I
cute.
guess. We don't really see it again in the book.
Yeah, it's really cute. I mean, they are 13, so like
Yeah.
that's not, you know, a big part of the story, but it's cute that they have their little moment. And
Yeah.
it's interesting too because like you can tell that Vaz is kind of into Lily. He like the second time he meets her, he like compares her to a tiger lily or something like that. Like I'm like, okay. And Lily's like, oh my god, like she has like so many funny like little insecure thoughts where she's like, she doesn't know how to take things all the time, so she's like,
Yeah.
oh my god, like that's so nice in her head. But then like later, like at the library, they met a friend of Vaz's. Oh my god, what's her name?
I don't remember.
She's, I don't know, but Cammy, and she's just like really
yeah.
like peppy blonde, like seems like she's kind of a fun, quirky character. And she and Vaz are clearly friendly, and Lily's immediately jealous. It's just funny because I'm like, I don't know. I feel like he's made it pretty clear he's into you, but then again, you know, it is kind of made obvious that he also might have a thing for Cammy too. So like, her jealousy is understandable.
Yeah. And she's also 13. She doesn't really know how to handle it.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that too. But yeah, but then it's made clear. I think they might even have a conversation about it here, where Vaz mentions that he used to have a thing for Cammy, or maybe they have that conversation later. They might have that conversation.
Yeah, later. I think they have that later.
But here, like Vaz is the one who kind of makes the move, and they like kiss a little bit. But then of course, that's when her mom walks in because she finds them in the attic. She opens the door and lets them out, and she's like, then she turns into like a mom.
Yeah.
And this is where we see the more uptight side of Arden Crabtree that we had not seen before.
That classic, like, I need my coffee kind of person. This is where she becomes that person.
Yes. And so then it becomes like Lily is basically under house arrest at this point because she's like, oh my god, like you're supposed to be, you know, doing your schoolwork, and you're not supposed to have, you know, be having boys over when I don't know, and like, oh my god, have I really just been like a lax mother this whole time? And so she decides to be like, you know, become kind of like do like a 180. And you can kind of tell, you know, in the same way that Lily is kind of spinning out in her own way from being like having been in such an unstable situation, having had to move all these times and things like that, how Lily's got her own hangups. Her mother does too, because her mother, you know, I mean, she's just been through a breakup. We don't get to see the details of it on page because, you know, it's Lily's perspective, but we can kind of tell that, you know, her mother's having her own kind of crisis.
Yeah.
And so this is where she's like, man, you know, maybe I really haven't done right by my child. And she's trying to kind of overcorrect in a way that's really not
the right way.
Right? Yeah. But especially you can see where it's coming from.
Yeah, you can absolutely see where it's coming from, but especially with the way, and Lily points this out as well, like with the way that she's raised her in the past, like it completely, it's almost militaristic, like it's extra stifling.
Yeah, that was my least favorite part of the book as a kid because I was like so indignant on like Lily's behalf, I think.
Yeah.
Especially because Lily had brought up the idea of like the house being haunted before, but her mother just kind of took it as her trying to be like a troublemaker, because she was, you know, mad at her for making the move again, and she didn't really take it seriously. And that's where too you learn that her mother's, you know, flightiness and like her imaginativeness, it has limits, because she is not on board with this whole ghost thing. She's not down with that. That's not her brand.
Lily is
like
shocked
out there
too.
Yeah, and Lily is shocked because that's where Lily really finds her imagination again, I think, and opens her mind, is through this whole experience. Her mother just does not, you know, this is not where her imagination leads her.
Right. And by the end, like, Arden has had a direct experience and witnessed some things that can't be explained, you know. But
she's still not down with it.
Yeah, she's still like, and it is shocking to Lily, you know, after everything that, like, what her mother has seen and the way her mother is, that she doesn't accept ghosts and thinks Lily's kind of crazy.
Yeah. And it's really funny, and it's very realistic, because I mean, I feel like I know people who have had experiences who will recount them and be like, yeah, but you know, whatever, I don't really believe in that stuff. but then there are other people who are like super into that, ready to believe it, whatever. It's very realistic because that is, in my experience, how actual people are sometimes.
Yeah, especially adults.
Yeah. We talked about Lily and her mom, and Lily's relationship with her mom is basically at an all-time low because the trust there is, quite frankly, broken.
Right.
It's in the span of time was when she goes to see Madame Durrican, she sneaks off because her mom, as she's staying with her mom at the shop, when her mom's at the shop, she doesn't trust her to be alone, all that. And then at a certain point, we get this interlude called the Lily Song.
It's in place of like a normal ghost interlude. It's as if it's like replacing one of those, except it's not about the ghosts.
So this is at the character's basically at her like low point. She's fought with her mom. Lola has dyed her hair bright pink while she slept, so she is just walking around with bright pink hair. She's not a big fan.
But she has to act like she's a fan because her mom is like, oh my god, another rebellious thing that you're doing now that I've grounded you like a normal teen. Like, ugh.
Yeah.
So she's got to pretend like this is what she wanted.
And she knows her mom won't believe her.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's a whole thing. So she's just not in a great place. So then we get this chapter, the Lily Song, which is after another Lola chapter. And basically we learn as the chapter goes on, it is a memory of Lily's, actually. So we haven't talked about Lily's dad yet, but she did have one.
Lily doesn't like talking about him.
Yeah, he left when she was 5. I believe it was 5. He was a musician, and he just like left for a gig and didn't come back. And you know, it's not implied that they think he's dead or anything. They think he just abandoned them, basically. And so she doesn't talk about it because she mentions like, you know, people understood like dead, but they didn't understand gone. You know, people understood dead, people understood divorce, they didn't understand gone. Because basically like he just left, just disappeared on them. And you know, it's implied that it's assumed that he left voluntarily, not that like something happened to him or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this memory chapter where Lily is little, and the Lily Song is basically a song that her dad used to like play on his guitar, and he would sing her name and just like Lily, 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 Lily. Don't know how he did that.
Yeah, Lily. Well, she said you start off, or that in the thing, it's like you start off slow and then you go really fast, and it's like, how can you go fast?
Yeah.
Like you go Lily, 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 Lily.
Yeah. And so like sometimes like her dad would get home late, and she would either stay awake or she'd wake up, and she'd go Fridays she would wake up in the middle of the night, she'd go out and wait for her dad to come home, and then he would come home and he would play the song for her. She had this fish that she loved, this like toy fish called Chucklehead. And
it's so cute.
Yeah, and it's really cute. It's just like this really cute memory that she has with her dad, and he's like, you know, tells her like time for bed, and he puts her to sleep, and it's just really cute. Just like they talk about school, and
it shows like she had when she was little, she had a great relationship with her dad.
Yeah.
And this is why like she's kind of so scarred. Like not to mention all these her mother's boyfriends that for the most part she didn't like. I actually think she liked the last guy because she called him a traitor, and he bought her a microscope, and she missed her room in the house that they shared. I actually think she liked the last guy, but she doesn't really like her mother's boyfriends. But so forget about like that betrayal. Like this is what really like makes her so hardened, is that like this person that she loved and like thought loved her and seemed like he loved her just left and abandoned her. And so it's like really, really cute and sweet, but also so sad.
Yeah. It's so sad. And you could tell, like, you know, you don't really know, like, this is from Lily's kind of memory, so you don't know what's going on with this dude and what his deal is. I mean, he seems to like her as a child. Like, it doesn't seem like a situation where she's a child interpreting a relationship differently than it was. Like, it's not indicated by the text that, like, he was actually not really wanting to be involved with her life at all. But you know, she has this toy fish, and he says at one point, you're getting a little old for Mr. Chuckle, aren't you? And Lily says, that's what Mommy always says, but I'm not. And then he says, there will come a day when you won't need him anymore. And she says, yes, but I'll still like him. And he says, you could change your mind. People change their minds all the time. And Lily says, I could, but I won't. And then the fish ends up falling in between like the wall and her bed. She can't find it the next day. And so then it's kind of basically indicated that she never finds it again. And then her like mom tells her that he was lonely for his fish friends, so he had left during the night and swam through the drain pipes to the sea. And that's how we leave the chapter off, but you get this clear indication that like this fish is kind of like this stand-in metaphor for her dad.
Yeah.
And so I guess, when he says, people change their minds all the time.
He's talking about him. He's not talking about her.
Yeah. And maybe he did change his mind, And I don't know that in that moment it's supposed to mean that he knew that he was going to leave them right then.
Right.
Like,
we don't know. And that's the extent. That's the only time we ever see or really hear of her dad again.
Yeah.
But this is also the time where Catherine, the ghost, makes herself known, because she typically hangs out in the chandelier of Lily's, of like the house's dining room, I think. Like she kind of swings from the chandelier and tries to like forget about all the horrible things that happened to her family. Her son is Max, and Max died, and Wesley, her son, is the one who killed him, and she knows all this. So like she spends most of her time trying to just like hanging from the chandelier and just like trying to relax and forget about it. But she actually goes up, Lily's having this dream, and wakes up crying. And Catherine, the ghost, is the one who goes into her room and is kind of consoling her. And Lily thinks it's her mom, but it's not. It's Catherine. And she turns around and like to talk to her mom, and it's not. Her mom's not there. No one's there. And so she knows it's a ghost. I think Lily thinks it's Max at that point.
Yeah.
But she later finds out.
I don't know if we know it's Catherine yet either.
I don't know if we do. I don't think we do.
I think we might learn that a bit later, but yeah.
Yeah.
But it is Catherine, and she leaves the Cupid doll, which is nice of her, a little misguided.
Yeah. But well, she's the one. Catherine's the one who gave it to Arden's mom, who gave it to Arden. So
yeah.
There's significance to her. Yeah.
But actually, the thing about Catherine that it's really funny. When I was little and I read this, I thought she hanged herself.
Yeah, so did I.
But reading this again, this is one of the things that I read wrong when I was younger. I actually read the darker, like version of events.
I guess.
But now I realize she didn't. Wesley says that she died at the dining room staring at.
Yeah, but it sounds like she like starved to death because she stopped eating. So
yeah,
it's also pretty dark.
Like she starved, yeah, which is also dark. So she starved, so that's also dark. But she starved to death basically because she stopped eating because she knew that, Wesley at a certain point, we haven't even gotten to that yet, but Wesley says that it was because she knew that Max had like set all those fires, but it actually was because she knew that he had killed Max. But what I'd actually thought had happened is that she had hanged. I mean, it's basically the same difference, right? But I thought she'd actually hanged herself from the chandelier. It turns out, I thought that too. The reason I got that impression is because we get a chapter of hers later on where she hangs out in the chandelier, and she actually hangs often, I think, by her ankle upside down, which is the position of the hanged man on the traditional tarot card.
Ah, interesting.
And I would not have known that when I was younger.
Yeah.
But I know it now. So it's funny. Because, she is the hanged man, basically.
Yeah.
And just for a little tarot trivia, the hanged man isn't necessarily like a dude who's like hanged in the traditional sense. Usually it's depicted as someone who's hanging upside down on a tree from an ankle by his ankle, and it's not necessarily meant to be like anything like sinister. It's often meant to indicate either like stagnancy or like a perspective change or things like that.
And I'd say probably stagnancy in this case because she's stuck in the afterlife.
Yeah. But it was really funny for me to like read that and be like, oh, so she didn't actually literally hang herself from the chandelier, but she is symbolically portraying herself as like the hanged man in tarot. But that chapter doesn't come until a bit later. like towards the very end, I think. But we're kind of
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we may as well start talking about like the main conflict, which is like not the fact that Lily's being haunted, but actually like this mystery that she's trying to solve about like what Max wants and like what happened. And it's really like she doesn't even realize like what she stumbled into until her Uncle Wes comes to dinner for the second time.
Yeah, we
Second
didn't
time?
talk about when he came the first time, but basically he's like kind of an uptight-ish kind of dude, clearly disapproves of Arden and her lifestyle. Arden's
Yeah.
clearly not thrilled with having him over. It's very awkward. The adults clearly have a background that Lily doesn't really know much about, but they're a little tense with each other, and it seems to have to do with money, and he's offering Arden money, and she's like, I don't want your charity, blah, blah, blah. But he's, he doesn't have the best relationship with her family, but he's,
Yeah.
portrayed as more or less, other than being old fashioned in a certain sense, benign.
Yeah.
And we learn that he's not.
Until yeah, until he comes for this second dinner. So all this starts when Lily's mom finds this old coin under like a couch. Their cat is playing with it, and she makes Lily this necklace out of the coin. And so like Lily's wearing it, and the librarian sees it, very interested. Lily finds out that it's like actually worth a lot of money. And then that later that day or later that week, Uncle Wes comes over for dinner the second time, and he sees the necklace, and he is like kind of outraged by it immediately. And he's like, "I knew it. I knew you found it. Where is it?" And they're Lily and Arden are like, "What is going on? Like, who are you, mild mannered Uncle Wes? Why are you yelling? Like, what is going on?" And the long and short of it is, like, he knows that Max had found this treasure back when they were kids, and that Max had hidden it.
And
And
Captain Kidd's treasure, too, to be
yeah,
specific.
Captain Kidd's treasure specifically. And so Wes assumed that Arden and Lily, but specifically Arden, but both of them were there to get the treasure, essentially. And that's why he thinks Arden doesn't want his money, and Arden's like, "I've never wanted your money," you know. And so while this is happening, Bailey Burton, the library guy from next door, comes over. Turns out he's working with Uncle Wes. He also wants the treasure. He also thinks that they have it. And so now, all of a sudden there's like a more sinister vibe at this dinner. But like Arden still doesn't know what's going on. Lily's got like kind of a little bit more of an idea, but still not really anything. Then Vaz calls because he and Lily haven't been speaking because she's been on lockdown basically. And he is like, "I'm coming over." He ends up coming over, and Mrs. Reedy, the librarian, is outside and finds her. She's not working with Bailey and Uncle Wes, but she wants in because she used to date Uncle Max back in the day,
And
and
she knew about the treasure.
she knew about the treasure, and she feels entitled to it because he left her when Max died. He quote unquote left her,
She feels
and
abandoned because she feels like she believes in like the idea that maybe he was setting all those fires and that he never really intended to like commit to her, and that he
yeah,
got himself killed by being stupid, and she
yeah.
feels abandoned basically.
And so now all these people are there. Uncle Wes brings out a gun, and he's basically like, "Take me to the treasure. Like, there's a treasure map somewhere. Where is it?" And Lily and Arden don't have any idea, but then Mrs. Reedy asks, what, I forget exactly what she asks, but it leads Lily to think, "Oh, okay, the Cupid doll, that's something that like has been handed down in our family. That is something that could have it. That's why it's been played with. That's why it's been moved. It's the Cupid doll." She puts together these hauntings and stuff. And so sure enough, Max's treasure map is in the dress of the Cupid doll. They tie Arden up and leave her at the house. They take not Max, they take Lily and Vaz and follow the map and have them dig. And then so the climax of the book is basically
It
like,
brings them to the beach.
yeah, it brings them to the beach. That's where the map brings them. And so the climax of the book is Max. I keep saying Max. I mean Vaz. Vaz and Lily are digging. They find this treasure box basically, but at the same time, like Lily's putting together, you know, she's seeing Wes like light the fires. She's putting together the way he's talked about fires, like, and when I say setting fires, like he uh, set a fire in their fireplace, and then he's also like lighting a cigarette, and she's putting it together. She's like, Max didn't do this. Like, Uncle Wes is the bad one. Like, he killed Max. That's what Max was trying to say when we were at Madame Durkin. Like, that's why he didn't want her to read the tarot cards the right way. Like, this is what it is. So she goes to hit him with the shovel. He turns around, smacks her with the butt of a gun, and then.
And she's unconscious. And this is where we finally get to meet Max.
And this is also where like all of the characters from the book are all together at the same time, meaning, you know,
yeah.
All Uncle Wes, Lily, Vaz, Bailey, Miss Reedy, Arden shows up, but also Lola and Max and the two ghosts from the beach, just like, you know, the husband and wife. They're all involved. Like, we get everybody. I think the only one who's not there is probably Catherine.
Yeah.
Who's still back at the house.
The gang's all here. And you know, I said earlier, like, the story threads don't all come together in the sense that not every character knows everything about every character's involvement, but there is this scene where they do all get to be together in like one moment, which is nice and pretty cool. My favorite thing though is like finally getting to like communicate with Max in this moment, because he's been the most mysterious ghost, even though he's been kind of the crux of the whole mystery. And then he just shows up and he's so freaking weird and I love it.
Yeah, he's like, you can tell like in true ghost fashion, I'd say like he's not all the way there in terms of like his sentences are kind of, I mean, just the things that he's saying are not very specific. They're kind of more, what is the word I'm looking for?
I know what you mean. It's kind of like he's very like ethereal in the way that he communicates and like is.
He's like, he's there, but he's not all there.
Yeah. But at the same time, like he seems to have the most wherewithal of any of the ghosts. Like because he says, so it's very interesting because we get a bit more of a glimpse into like what the story's idea of like, you know, life after death is and all that through this scene. And so like we get it's in a chapter called Ghost. It's just called Ghost. And so Lily's, you know, there and she sees him and he's next to her and she's like, hello, Max. And he's like, hello, Lily, your hands are on fire. He shrugged. They're always like that. I'm used to it. That's the thing that we know because of Madame Durkin, is that his hands are always on fire. And he's always apparently doing some kind of weird dance, which I thought was just an interesting tidbit. Like, I was trying to, like, I always imagine this very funny, like, kind of dance. I wonder why he's dancing. We don't really get an explanation for it. I mean, I'm assuming it's supposed to kind of evoke, like, flames. Laura Ruby, if you want to confirm whether this is like a personality quirk that he had in like life, or if it's just because of the fire thing, I'm just curious. But it's just funny. He's like, oh, and Max it's also mentioned he was 17 when he died too. He was a teenager.
Yes, yeah.
When he was burned to death.
Older than Lily.
He was a young person, but in this you kind
of Wes is older. Wes is older. Wes is a couple years older.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much older, but Wes was definitely older when he killed his brother.
Yeah. And but it's interesting because in Ghost form you really get a more like timeless kind of version of Max.
Mm-hmm.
And so they kind of have like a little bit of like a pseudo like philosophical kind of conversation here, because you know she's like, am I dead? I can see you, like Lily. And he's like, no, you're dreaming. And she says, I don't think so. It doesn't usually hurt this much when I dream, because she got hit over the head. And he says, then you must be dead. He stopped dancing. What does it feel like dreaming? I forget. And Lily said, dreaming feels real mostly. And he's like, oh, I forget how that feels too. But obviously Lily's not dead. She does wake up. It is a children's book.
But it is interesting that like this is the one time that she is able to interact like with Max as a ghost.
Yeah. This is the first time.
And I think we're meant to believe that she is actually interacting with Max. Like this isn't some sort of dream. Like this is her.
Like like even if she is in some kind of dreaming state, like it's allowing her to communicate with him. Yeah. And so they have this interesting little exchange. She says, I'm sorry I didn't believe in you at first. I wasn't sure if you were real. And he says, and now you're sure? Lily frowned. Well, I can see you, and I can touch. She reached out, but Max drew back. Does your mother love you? He asks. of course, Lily said, what does that have to do with anything? How do you know that she loves you if you can't see love? If you can't touch it? So this is where we get like into that, like believing in things you can't see
Yeah.
and
And
things.
like Lily's close to getting to that point,
Mhm.
but like she's still, even in this moment, she's like, "Oh, you're only real because I can see you." And he's like, "No, you know that that's not true."
Yeah, and it does kind of like go back to that like conflict we've seen in the books, and there were quotes about this too, but we don't have time to talk about all the quotes I want to talk about. But like about like the issues that Lily's mom had with her family in terms of like a very materialistic attitude that she really kind of was trying to get a kind of escape from, and how
Mhm.
she was really more interested in like the intangible things that made life meaningful, like, you know, love, creativity, art, all those things. And not wanting to place so much emphasis on the material. And then Lily's, you know, her pushback against that because of the life that they've been leading up to that point, where they don't have a lot of stability, and the balance between the material and the more immaterial, and you know, those kinds of things. And I kind of see that as this kind of tension between the things that you can see and touch and the things that you can't. The things
Yeah.
that you know are there, even if you can't see them. Like you could feel them, or you know that they're there, but you can't. You know, it's not something that you can hold in your hand, kind of thing. Um, and so I just think that's interesting, kind of bringing that back in this way,
Yeah.
in this conversation. And then we get an indication of like Max talks, he clarifies a bit about like Lola and Catherine, and also about, we get more about like why Max is still here. And so because he talks about Lola, he calls her a spiteful soul bent on mischief, and he says she'll be here a long time. And Lily says, where's here? Max closed his eyes. Nowhere. Lily was suddenly frightened. Isn't there a heaven? And he said, heavens, yes, many heavens. Why aren't you in heaven then? We are earthbound until we learn. Some learn while alive, others learn while dead. A few never learn. What did you have to learn? Compassion. He shook his head sadly. The hardest thing to learn. So this is really interesting, right? Because on one level, of course, it's interesting to learn like in this book, you know, there is a heaven, many heavens, which kind of just leaves things very broad, right? Like,
Yeah.
what does that mean, many heavens? It's kind of like meant to indicate that there's knowledge that, you know, ghosts have, that the dead have, that the living just aren't meant to have. That's fine. Pretty cool. But the idea that, you know, we're earthbound until we learn, some learn while alive, others learn while dead. So this idea of, you know, learning lessons, that the idea
Yeah.
that, you know, you have a lesson to learn in your life, or many lessons, and if you don't learn them, you are stuck here basically until you learn them, even if you're dead. And we also learned that he had to learn compassion. And this is like the closest hint we get to like what Max was actually like when
Yeah.
he was alive. Because, you know, we go from seeing him as this creepy kind of character who maybe set some fires and was a little bit like deranged, like Wes kind of paints him. Literally paints him, because he, it turns out, is the one who had that creepy painting commissioned
I
to make
remember from the
it.
first line where
Yeah,
they throw in that picture and
the
the
picture that Lily threw in the
yeah.
closet was one that Wes commissioned, because he wanted his, after his brother was dead, because he wanted people to really see him as like a crazy person who would have set
Yeah.
fires, when it was Wes himself who was that, actually that person. But like we do learn that, like, you know, in life, so we go from basically seeing Max as like, oh, you know, maybe he was like an arsonist, to seeing Max as like, oh, like this poor dude, like, you know, his mother loved him so much, like everyone thought he was great, like, and he was murdered by his brother. And then we see from him, you know, he had his own lessons to learn, and one of them was compassion. So clearly he had his own stuff going on.
Yeah.
And so there's,
And we're not like quite sure exactly what that was, but
oh,
he was also 17
yeah.
and didn't really have time to even get to that point to learn it in life, you know.
And
You know, it might not have meant that he just completely lacked compassion, but he was 17.
yeah, and
And
we have to kind of think about too, like compassion towards whom? Like maybe
mm,
it was that in death he was, you know, maybe he and his brother had a fraught relationship. Maybe he played into it, and you know, even if there was kind of a power imbalance there, maybe he had to learn about that. Maybe it was compassion even for, you know, regardless of what of, because he does get his revenge in a sense, like
yeah.
that happens, but maybe that's not even what his end goal was. Maybe there was something more to that. Maybe it was compassion for his ancestors not his ancestors, his descendants, or like by lineage, by like family at least.
Yeah, or his mother, returning the love and compassion that she felt for him.
Yeah.
And that is kind of where it ends up almost.
Yeah. It's just really interesting to see that. And then so then they have this whole conversation, and he talks about Catherine. He mentions the doll and everything. He clarifies things. But it's just like such a fascinating little interlude, because you learn more. You finally get to see Max. Max is honestly a character like I would read a whole book about Max the Ghost.
I'd read a whole book about all these people.
That's true. True. And then after that is then we get the older man and woman on the beach, and Lola, who see that like these people digging on the beach, and that one of them hit this girl in the head with a gun, and that's when
and by this point Lola had realized that Lily was not Steffi, so she left the house. But she sees Lily, and she's like, oh my god, like I know that girl. And she and the wife of the couple that are like left on the beach are like, oh my god, we have to do something. The husband's like, oh no, like be quiet, they'll hear you. Again, not realizing that, they are ghosts. And Lola's super into it because she's like, yeah, I know that I'm a ghost, but I also know that I could do stuff. Let's hurt this guy. And the wife is into it because she's like, an injustice is being done, and she's got no idea that she is dead, and
yeah,
what is about to happen.
And I don't know how I missed this all these other times I read it, but I just flipped to like the last page of that chapter, and the wife and Lola are like into it. They're going over there with their sand toys to go like fuck shit up, but the husband is like holding back. But then he decides to go after them, and he says, George Herbert Walker Bush in a red pickup truck. We're all done for. So I never noticed this. George Herbert Walker Bush in a red pickup truck. That is
maybe like that was who was president at the time that they died.
Yeah. Wait, okay.
Probably.
Now I have to was that in the 70s or the 80s? Because I said 70s
80s.
before, but yeah,
it was the 80s.
So I guess they died.
I think they died around the same time as Lola.
Yeah.
Right, that was the 80s. Yeah.
It was the 80s. When was George H.W. Bush?
80s, because he was after Reagan, and Reagan was 80s.
Oh yeah, right. Oh my God! Wait, no.
No.
Oh no. Yeah. Oh wait, 80s and 90s. Oh wow. So okay, so it wasn't like late 80s, early 90s.
So they died around the same time as Lola, because Lola died in 87.
Yeah, and they died after her, I think, because he was 89.
I mean, he was vice president, so it's possible like he was vice president.
Yeah. I mean, if he was like a really, I don't know, interesting.
Yeah, it's like I'm not entirely sure what that would mean, but
anyway, it's the first time I really like noticed that line. So
yeah.
And I read it so many times I didn't even think about it. Wild.
Yeah, me too.
But anywho, yeah, so that's fun. And then we get to see them when they actually attack. We actually get to see that from the other perspective, where like the human perspective, because Lily wakes up, like Vaz is like, Lily, wake up. It's like a whole thing. Where like, Vaz, I think he hit someone, or he tried to hit someone when I think he like tried to attack Wes, but then Aurelia, Miss Reedy, also got into it because she was like, oh, I was bitter, but I'm not this bitter. Like, I don't want to like hurt
like children. I don't want to hurt people, especially children.
Yeah. So they both were like trying to get at Wes, and
then like it's at this point that Lily starts to say like tell them that Wes killed Max, and Miss Reedy's like, what? New perspective and everything, and even Barely is like, what the heck? And Wesley is like, oh, come on, now you've got like a moral compass, like what? And then so like while this is all happening, the ghosts attack, and like they basically are watching like these things happen to Bailey and Wes, like without actually seeing what's happening, because they're ghosts. But like one of them has, I assume it's Lola, I'm not sure, puts like cover, like throws fishnet over Wesley's face and like pulls it, and like you can see the welts like forming in his face, but like you can't see the actual like fishnet, and like, so it's super super clear what's going on. And then it's at this point that like Arden also shows up, because she was let go, like Catherine let her, like basically untied her, and she was just like felt the ropes untie, so she kind of knew that she was untied. And this is one of the reasons that Lily can't believe at the end that like Arden still doesn't believe in ghosts, because she sees what's happening on the beach. She was also untied mysteriously. And so it's basically like these ghosts are just like killing it, and they knock Wesley into the hole, and he breaks both his legs. And this is the one part where like I felt like I was reading a children's book, because I don't know if you're close to that part in the book, but like he just basically like calls up from the bottom and is like, "I'll get you, you filthy monkeys." And I'm like, that's not what a grown man would say in this scenario. Like it just felt like, oh yeah, okay, I am reading a kid's book. Like, yeah,
Oh yeah, he does.
that's
I'll
the
get you, you filthy monkey.
yeah, that's the children's version of like fuck you all.
Yeah.
um and also like fuck my legs are fucked
Yeah.
all, like, you know. Sorry, not that we were gonna I think we were gonna try not to curse too much in
That's
this.
like a especially this one's like a review of a children. Well, it's not a review. It's a discussion of a children's book.
Yeah,
But we are adults, so
definitely a positive review if we're gonna do a review.
but
um
yeah, I'll get you, you filthy monkeys. It's like
like
you
yeah,
meddling
you're
kid. It's like a Scooby Doo.
yeah, exactly. Is his years long, like decades long, like like plot to kill his brother and get this treasure has just been uncovered and foiled in a way that he's got no idea how, basically, and both of his legs are broken and he's in a ditch, and his response is, "I'll get you, you filthy monkeys." but,
Yeah.
anyway,
Um.
just to
But
start wrapping things up, I guess we'll talk about what was in the treasure box, because they're expecting it to be Captain Kidd's fortune,
yeah.
or his treasure, right? All those coins. But it's actually Catherine's last will and testament that cuts Wesley out of the will and
Yes.
leaves everything to Arden's mother, who's now deceased, so it falls to Arden.
Yep. So
Um,
and yeah. So then the chapter after all that happens is basically wrapping things up, and it says they were not rich because it turns out, even if everything is going to them, Wesley wasn't really good with the business
and
aspect
he
of things.
ran it all into the ground, pretty much.
Yeah. But they got the house, which means they have a house to stay in. And they've got lots of expensive antiques they can sell. So they have some kind of stability, which is
Yeah.
good for them.
And it's great for Lily because she finally has a friend slash boyfriend in Vaz, and so
And
she
she
can go to
makes friends with
school.
Tammy, and I love it so much.
Yeah, she
Vaz
makes
is
friends with
fantastic.
Tammy.
So when they were
Um,
like getting like, basically like abducted and made to dig this hole for, Uncle Wes and everything, Vaz and Lily had, had to have like a little conversation because like, they were like, oh, we don't know what's gonna happen. So like they had to clear the air between them, and they had a conversation about how Vaz, used to have a crush on Cammy but doesn't anymore. He really likes Lily. And so but then it's just so nice because like Lily was really jealous of Cammy previously, and just like it was very much that like kind of like, girls hating girls kind of
yeah,
vibe.
and like what could have maybe written her off, but then
Yeah.
they didn't. Cammy becomes like her best friend, and they dye their hair together, and
Yeah.
it's like cute. And Lily has friends for
Yeah.
the first time, and we don't really get to see it because it's kind of like in an epilogue, almost like here's what happened, and like now they're good kind of thing. But it's like, oh, it happened. Like it happened for her.
Yeah, it's really cute. I love it. And it's nice to, even when like Lily saw Cammy a couple times and like judged her like is not really like, but like didn't like her, was jealous of her. It like Cammy herself was never like painted as bad in any way. It was
Yeah,
very clear that it was Lily's own
yeah,
perspective that was causing her to dislike Cammy. And that's what I like.
definitely.
That's what I like. I really like when you can tell when it's a character's perspective and not the author speaking through the character about something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
With someone.
yeah, definitely.
Um it was very clear that it was like, this is Lily's own filter of like, I'm lonely and jealous and I see this girl as a threat because she's friends with this guy and she's really cool and cute. And like, it's just like so well done. And then like, you know,
Yeah.
when they do become friends, it's just so nice because it's like, it just feels like a weight has been lifted off of Lily's shoulders
Yeah. And
with this
she's like
whole
finally, yeah, she's finally able to like open up to people and like, you know, give people a chance and like enjoy herself, like have a childhood, enjoy herself. Which is exactly how you would have wanted this to end. Like it's perfect.
yeah. And it feels like organic. It feels like, it does
It
feel like
does.
Lily is a character who's, she's not like, and I don't know if anyone really is inherently cynical and in a bad mood all the time. It's a product of her circumstances, and she is someone who like, with a little bit of like prompting, can change and grow and be happier
Yeah.
with herself and open up and really like we get to see more of Lily's like open-minded side, just as we get to see more of Lily's mother's less open-minded side, and you kind
Yeah.
of see that these characters maybe aren't so different from each other after all.
I feel like
Yeah.
there's definitely more that we could say.
I mean, well, there's also that very like the very very end.
When she
Um,
like sees Max or like knows like sees Max and Catherine off basically.
yes, the second Boo chapter, the very very end, where we get closure with Max and Catherine. So it's after like, you know, things have settled with Lily, and she's on the beach and she feels, you know, a presence, and she knows that Max and Catherine are there with her, and she's built a little sandcastle house, and it's they help her make it into the house that, you know, she now inherited, um, and she knows that they're leaving for good, so they've learned their lessons. Whatever they need to learn, they've learned it. And I do wonder in this moment, because we do get some sense that there's a little bit of time that's passed between what's happened and now. And I wonder if Max had learned his lesson but was sticking around until Catherine learned whatever she needed to learn.
Right.
Um,
So I'm not sure what she needed to learn. I'm guessing it might be something more like being more involved because she spent so much time trying to forget. You know, it probably had something to do with her
yeah, with her like
accepting.
Arden to, you know, go help
Yeah.
them, and you know, maybe honestly with like the whole thing, maybe just making sure that Lily and Arden got settled into the house before they left.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the last line is "Goodbye, Lily, welcome home," and it made me
It is so sweet.
so good. It's like so happy because it's like, okay, good, they're moving on. They should be. That's good. We know that that's what they want to do, and like, so it's not really sad. Like, it's like where they're supposed to be going.
Yeah.
And then Lily gets her house, but it still feels a little bit bittersweet.
It does. It does. 'Cause, like they were there to like, you know, they were haunting her, but like in a good way.
Yeah. Oh, it's just such a good book.
It is. And there's definitely more that we could say, and there's more that like we didn't talk about. So I highly encourage if you're at all interested and you haven't read it, like definitely go read it.
Yeah.
Um,
And okay, I have only read 2 of Laura Ruby's books thus far, because as soon as I finished Lily's Ghost, I was like, this was just like just so well done. I just need to see what else Laura has done. And
mhm,
she has several other books, but one of them I picked up was Bone Gap. It's a young adult novel, so it's you know, a bit higher in the
a
age
little
range.
bit older.
She has like adult. It looks like she has like adult and other young adult novels as well. So it's just like a lot of things to choose from. But Bone Gap is the only other one I've read, and I will say, loved it. Highly recommend it. Even if you're like, I don't know if this sounds like it's for me, like check that out. It's really unique. Again, like this story felt really unique to me. Bone Gap also feels really unique in almost a completely different way. It's got a lot of magical realism going on. It still has really well drawn characters, but it is a completely different kind of story. Uh,
I will be reading it. I haven't read it yet, but I am
yes,
planning to. Did you get it on Kindle or did you get it from the
I got
library?
it from the library. Oh,
Did you?
also, guys, if you didn't know this, if you have a library card or you want to get a library card, you can take out ebooks and audiobooks from your library in most cases, as far as I know. So like, I don't know, I didn't know this for a long time, and I wasn't really nearby a library where I could get books like regularly, so it's changed my life. Like, you can just straight up borrow an ebook, like, no time between getting the book and, like, actually having
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do that.
It's great. Love it. Highly recommend it. Yeah. That's how I read Bone Gap. And it was great. So, I don't know. I feel like it's nice to also give recommendations sometimes of books that, like, because we're doing rereads of books that we read when we were younger. So it's inherently going to be older books. But Bone Gap is a bit more recent. It's like 2015, 2016, I think. So it's just, you know, but it's really good. So anyway.
All right. Well, I think that about wraps it up. Thank you for listening to our discussion about Lily's Ghost. We definitely had a good time reading it, and we had a good time talking about it. So, if there's ever an opportunity for you to interact and leave comments and let us know what you thought, please do it. And we hope that you enjoyed it as much as we did.
Yes.
Or at least almost as much, half as much.
And yeah, and hopefully you join us next time when we're reading what? We don't know, but we will figure it out.
Figure it out.
And we will we'll be back. This is a good time.